Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. The Beach Boys are chronicled in the new Brian Wilson documentary, Long Promised Road, premiering tomorrow at the Tribeca Film Festival. You'll hear from Wilson in just a few minutes, but first we begin with my conversation with Beach Boys lead singer Mike Love.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm speaking with the one and only Jason at TOP.
You're darn right.
Great. Music has been a fact of life since we were born in this family. And, of course, the Beach Boys is primarily a family group. There's myself and my first cousins, Brian, Dennis, and Carl Wilson. That's what got us started at family gatherings, like Christmas parties and stuff like that, and birthday parties, and every special occasion always involved music. My mother, she was so into music. She was into opera and symphonies and all that. I've always felt that, for instance, California Girls, the opening of California Girls was like an overture in itself.
It's true.
And my cousin Brian, around that time in 65 and 66, when we did the Pet Sounds album, there were a lot of symphonic or instrumentation that's ordinarily, consigned to just symphonies, but we used it in our rock or our pop music. So, for instance, the opening strains of California Girls is magnificent with an orchestra. Wouldn't it be nice? It's phenomenal with an orchestra. God Only Knows is incredible with the orchestra.
Yeah.
And we have an arrangement of In My Room, one of our really beautiful ballads, that is just incredibly beautiful.
Pet Sounds goes down as one of the greatest albums ever, but did you have a sense at the time as you're cutting it of this could be something special?
Well, we knew it was special because the orchestrations and the arrangements and the musicianship for the tracks were done by the best musicians in the West Coast at that time. We were on tour in Japan. When we came back from Japan, because Brian Wilson ceased to tour with the Beach Boys in 1964. Mm-hmm. I mean, occasionally he'd come out over the years and do some shows, but he retired from touring to devote himself full-time to production, mm-hmm. writing and arranging and producing albums. So that left us as the touring group, myself, Carl Wilson, Dennis Wilson, Bruce Johnston, Alan Jardine. We would all go and tour. We came back from Japan, and we were sent acetates, which are like a record, but they're just made right there in the studio.
Right.
They're not mass produced. They're acetates at the time, and we would play. Nowadays, you'd send an MP3 or something on your cell phone or to your computer and play it. But those days, it was like a little record. And in fact, Bruce Johnston took an acetate of the Pet Sounds album and played it for John Lennon and Paul McCartney in England.
Wow.
And they heard it, and they were very impressed and got busy on their Sgt. Pepper's album. We knew the songs were going to be special because the orchestration and the arrangements were brilliant, and we came in and did all the vocals. We sang all the vocals. We worked very hard on all the vocals, and there is a CD that exists, a box set that just has the vocals alone. And when you listen to that, it's pretty incredible how phenomenal the vocal arrangements are.
That's awesome. Yeah, you mentioned playing the acetate for John Lennon and Paul McCartney. I think I read somewhere that McCartney said "God Only Knows" was his favorite song or the best written song, something like that. He was just in all of it.
Yes.
He's
been very generous in his praise.
Do you think there was a little back and forth influence there? Do you think that them hearing that influenced Sgt. Pepper at all?
Well, they say that was the case. I mean, there was a rivalry there, but it wasn't like a negative thing at all. It was like, oh wow, that was great. Well, we better do something really great too.
We better up our
game. It was like that. It was like, yeah, exactly. It was like it's like if you're playing basketball with somebody, and they have a really good, hook or shot, some kind of shot, and it makes you want to play better. Same with tennis, the same with any game. And this was not a game; it was the game of music, if that's a game. But it does. If you hear something brilliant, it makes you want to. It pulls out your best. It makes you want to come to the party with your best efforts. And that's what it was like between Rubber Soul and Pet Sounds and Sgt. Pepper and all that kind of thing. So there was definitely a competition there, but it was always a mutual admiration society at the same time. There's nothing negative about it. Well, nobody's been more, wonderful about our Pet Sounds album in general, and God only knows, and specifically, than Paul McCartney, and that's a great honor because, I mean, nobody's more prolific and a better songwriter than Paul McCartney. So it's wonderful. We've always had a wonderful, if some people thought it was a rivalry, that's great, but it was more of a mutual admiration society. And that time period, the 60s, was so rich with music. I mean, the Temptations and all of Motown, for instance, along with the Beatles, along with the Beach Boys, a lot of fantastic music. And so we're just thrilled to be able to still have our songs appreciated to this day.
Absolutely. Well, God Only Knows was Paul's favorite. Do you have a personal favorite one?
They're all such great songs, but I think California Girls is incredibly great. I love that song. I think it's fantastic. I wrote all the words, and my cousin Brian did the track with the great musicians in L.A. called the Wrecking Crew. And so, yeah, that's one of my favorites. But there's many, many favorites, Surfing USA, Good Vibrations, I Get Around, Fun, 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 Help Me Rhonda. And, California Girls is right up there, though.
Definitely. It's the dead of summer, and you guys have so many great beach-style songs with Surfing USA and Surfer Girl and all the rest. But you mentioned In My Room, which is sort of different from that. That's more of a introspective, haunting kind of song. But explain sort of the range you guys had from sort of those more bubbly surfer songs as opposed to some of the really heavier stuff you did.
Well, in life, our music kind of emulates life in a way. I mean, in life, you have your moments where you're introspective or melancholy.
Yeah. Maybe
something didn't go so right, or maybe you're concerned about your life and what it's going to become or what it has become or whatever. Like, for instance, in The Warmth of the Sun, the song we wrote together, Brian and I, it was as a result of it was very moody. Brian had this really moody melody and this beautiful harmonies going, and I wrote the words having to do with an infatuation I had with this girl, but she didn't feel the same way towards me that I felt towards her. So it was over. It wasn't happening. Yeah. But you had at least felt that love, and so it was something that I paraphrase it as, it was an analogy. The warmth of the sun became the memory of having felt that way.
Wow.
Even though it's over, it never really happened. Maybe it was just a fantasy, but it did affect you. And so The Warmth of the Sun was a melancholy thing. It was about a sad event or something that was disappointing. But wow. You were emotionally involved, but no longer was it real.
Wow.
However, there was the memory of having felt that way. So even though it was not the most fun thing to experience, at least there was something good about it. And so that was my contribution to The Warmth of the Sun, was the positive, the silver lining on the cumulus nimbus cloud, I call it.
Oh, wow.
It was a sad thing, but there was something about it that was good. People will ask me, what is your favorite song? Well, it depends on my mood.
That's a good point, and there's so many of them to choose from. So for every mood, you guys captured it all. Before we go, you have a memoir?
Yes, I sure do. It's called Good Vibrations, My Life as a Beach Boy by Mike Love. And I work with a really excellent writer named Jim Hirsch, who's had some New York Times bestsellers. He's researched the Beach Boys. He probably knows more about the Beach Boys than I ever will. But it's really great because he did extensive interviews with me over the last couple of years. We spent a lot of time together at my homes, or he'd come and visit me on tour, and interviews with myself and other people involved with the group, family members and others. So it's a rather comprehensive look at at the career of my life, starting as a child, and the family growing up, and the musical musical environment in which I grew up, and culminating in just last year's Christmas get together. I mean, it's pretty comprehensive, and it addresses, from my point of view, in my voice, what went on with the group. What my contribution was, and there, it wasn't always easy to think about it or write about it. And I did an audio book too. I read it out. It took me 3.5 days to read the book at my recording studio in Lake Tahoe, my home in Tahoe, and it was emotional. In some parts of it was just really upbeat and cool because we're talking about really fantastic, positive things, like Good Vibrations going to number 1 in 1966 and voted number 1 group in Great Britain, number 2 being the Beatles, number 4 the Stones. And so,
wow.
I mean, there's really highs, but there are also some emotional things, like the passing of my cousin Carl Wilson, who was such a dedicated musician and first cousin, known all of his life. I was older than he, and a lot of the disappointments in not being credited for some of the songs that I had written, which I ultimately had to go to court to establish authorship.
Wow.
Which was a bummer, but it had to be done.
Yeah.
And so there's things that are not so pleasant to recall, and they're like maybe the death of my sister, who passed away from cancer, or my father, or these are emotional things in a person's life. Family members, getting sick and passing away, and there's ups and downs, but by and large, I mean, you have to, if you're going to be objective about it, what the Beach Boys have done musically is given so much pleasure, happiness, and positive gift to so many millions of people that I think if you get hung up on the not so great part, you're missing the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is a fantastic, almost miraculous body of music that is uplifted and entertained so many people for so many generations now, worldwide. So that's what I primarily choose to focus on. I've always been one to try to accentuate the positive, even if things weren't so great. I have a lot to be thankful for, in spite of all the things that you could get hung up on and be depressed about, because I choose to put my attention on, what I'm doing today and tonight. I think if you accentuate the positive and be appreciative of life's gifts, I think you're a lot better off,
I love that outlook. It's amazing. When that movie Love and Mercy came out a couple years ago, what did you make of that movie? Was that pretty accurate? Was it? Do you think it'll get a new generation back into you guys' music?
I don't know. It's more like about Brian and his ups and downs with his psychiatrist and his relationship with his wife and stuff. It's not so much of a documentary of the Beach Boys per se,
Right.
So I don't know, but it just further perpetuates the variety of ways in which people can appreciate the Beach Boys' music. So whatever my cousin Brian and I did, going back as far as 5 decades, going forward to, our most recent number 1 hit was Kokomo. That was 30 years ago. So it's miraculous and wonderful that our music is appreciated as much as it is to this day.
Well, it's just timeless. I honestly think the type of music you guys made, it's just going to be around forever, if you ask me. At least I hope so. We appreciate your time. It was awesome talking to you.
Well, thank you, Jason. Thanks a lot for putting me on your part of the programming.
I next spoke with songwriting genius Brian Wilson and his wife Melinda during a mental health summit at the National Press Club in 2015, timed with the release of the biopic Love and Mercy.
Beautiful movie. What was it like when you guys saw the movie for the first time? To see your own life up there, and I know it was a long time.
I felt very close to the movie because the actors that played me very well, very accurately.
Yeah.
So it was quite an experience.
How was it seeing her play you?
Who could ask for anybody better than Elizabeth? She's amazing, I thought. She did a great job.
And Brian, how much contact did you have with Paul and John Cusack before?
They spent a couple of weeks with me to pick up on my mannerisms and stuff, so they got me down pat.
Mostly John, because Paul had more material to educate himself through. But John was at our house quite a bit.
Right.
But he's lovely, so it was amazing. We loved having him.
Awesome. I should tell you guys, congratulations, right? Is this your 20 years of marriage? Yeah.
February it was 20.
What's the secret? Is it in the title? Is it Love and Mercy, or what's the secret?
Yeah, a lot of love and mercy, and I don't know, it just flew by. It doesn't seem like 20 years.
No, it doesn't, but yeah.
But it is.
Yeah. You said in the press conference some of these issues is you've been dealing with them for about 40 years. What would you say to someone else that maybe young, they have a lot going on too in their head? What would you say to them after dealing with it 40 years? Hey kid, here's how I would
not
help.
to take drugs. That would be my advice.
How can they deal with it on a daily basis? Let's say they're not taking drugs, but they're still battling.
1 day at a time, their life. 1 day at a time.
Yeah.
And they have to talk. They have to tell people what they're going through instead of just doing it alone, because there's so many support groups out there. They need to seek support and help, just like if they had any other kind of disease. But for some reason, our society puts a very stigma on mental illness. The word mental illness, and people go, oh no.
How do we break the stigma?
I think what we're doing here today and what Change Directions has been doing, the campaign, that's how you do it. You get the word out. You talk about it. It shouldn't be a taboo.
Yeah.
Especially when 1 in 5 people are suffering.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
That's
It's everywhere. It's everywhere you look.
It's
I mean,
everywhere.
How many
And
people in this room?
Not only that, it's hereditary.
Yeah.
So it will continue with, new generations. So we have to talk.
Absolutely. Brian, how did the movie accurately capture your musical process? Or take?
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
Paul Dano absolutely captured my the way I produced records. He even sang like me.
What is that musical process? Take me inside of you of when you have the idea of music coming aboard. Take me into that process of how that actually comes out of you.
Well, it comes out of my heart. I have a feeling, and that feeling guides my hands along the keys, and then I just start humming a melody, and then I scribble out the words.
And how do you free yourself to take chances and do things differently? Because a lot of things that you did in your music was really on the edge. You were taking things into a new place. So how do you free yourself to go where no one's gone before musically?
Well, like when we did Smile, that was an example of how we explored music a little farther into it.
Yeah. Is it wild to you that, when you hear someone like Paul McCartney saying God Only Knows is the best written song of all time, is it weird to say, hey, that came out of me?
Yeah, I actually couldn't believe that he thought that. That was great.
Where were you when you came up with God Only Knows? Because I think the lyrics kind of
come off of listening to Rubber Soul by the Beatles, and I went to my piano and I started writing God Only Knows. I said, I'm going to make an album just like Rubber Soul.
Do you have any personal ones that, that's what he said was the best written, but do you personally hold certain ones that are almost hidden gems?
Well, I'd have to say California Girls,
Yeah. Why is that?
Because of Mike's voice,
Oh, yeah.
is the way he sings. Unbelievable singer.
Is there a point where, because you've been playing these songs for decades, is there a point you get tired of singing certain ones, or do you always, does it bring it right back?
Always bring it right back, yeah.
And one of the cool things I thought in the movie, too, was, we've all heard Good Vibrations, but after seeing the movie and you think about it in a new way, is you're picking up good vibrations, and is it almost like you're picking up these musical vibrations from above, from the world around?
From God.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time,
Thank
sir.
you very much.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Finally, I spoke with actor Paul Dano, who portrayed young Brian Wilson in the movie.
Thanks for having me.
You were born in '84, right? Same as me. Okay, so when did you fall in love with this music? For me, it was through my parents, but how has this music kind of just come down to our generation? How is it so timeless?
Yeah, for me, there's been a few phases of the Beach Boys in my life. One is, as a kid, probably just after Disney songs comes the Beatles and the Beach Boys, I think. I mean, I feel like that's something
In that order?
parents might play, in the car ride somewhere, Disney songs, and then eventually you get to the Beatles. And then I think in high school, I remember starting to play music, and I remember, a few people who really, seemed to know about music. Pet Sounds started to have sort of a mythology around it. Yeah, and I remember getting into Pet Sounds probably like late high school, early college, and being surprised that was not my memory of, my kids' Beach Boys that I knew. And then there's, a third tier for me, which is like obsessive fandom now, which is from spending months and months and months listening and learning to play the piano and learning to sing these songs and
It's a healthy obsession.
really dissecting them. And oh man, I love it. I mean, I really do think Pet Sounds and Smile are two of the greatest albums ever made. And, there's been nothing like it before or since, and I'm so happy I got to spend a good chunk of my life listening to that music.
It's so great. Obviously, we know, that in movies a lot of sound design is done after the fact, obviously. But when you're on set and you're asked to do those scenes where, let's say, it's the clanking of dishes and silverware and you're hearing it in your head, or just the picking up good vibrations of the song ideas that are permeating, how was it handled on set? Is the director playing some music for you, some sounds to get those facial expressions?
Boy, it all kinds of ways. I mean, this was a really spirited set because everybody loved and cared about Brian. The studio stuff, we filmed in the studio. Brian actually recorded Pet Sounds back in 1965. So, and we had real musicians play the Wrecking Crew, the studio musicians, and some of them were his current touring band. So we were actually doing everything live. I mean, it was so spirited and so fun and delicious and creative. So the music stuff really took care of itself, in some way. Some of the other sides of his life, the real struggle, that was challenging. And it was wild to be on this seesaw of creativity and joy in the music, and then real struggle and pain in inside or in one's personal life. I certainly use music to help me as an actor, but it's a collaborative thing, and frankly, I'm not always sure how one does it. You sort of, hope and throw yourself in.
Now, when in the process did you meet Brian? Did you meet him in preparing for the role, or after the movie, or how did that work?
I did, but I waited quite a while to meet him in preparation. He was, I think, different in the '60s than he is now, and I also immediately felt with Brian that capturing his spirit, or trying to get a bit of soul, was what was most important, not, the external, the sort of any kind of mimicry, or, it was really, he really felt like a special human being to me. And so I wanted a lot of time where I just took in the music and did any of the other research I had to do. And he's also a sensitive guy, so I only wanted to ask him stuff that I felt I needed to. Otherwise, I just wanted to really get to know him. He's trusting me to play him, so I also wanted him to know me. And I loved meeting him. And the most fun thing to talk about, surely, was the music. He really can, light up and relax. And then, luckily, they were in their 20s when they were doing this. So there was a lot of people I met and talked to who worked with him back then, who are still alive because they were so young. They were so young.
That's the crazy thing about it. What about you? And did you have any contact with John Cusack in sculpting how you were both going to play the part, or were they done separately and then?
We did it separately and sort of by design. I think Bill, our director, didn't think that we needed to meet and sort of consult about the character, and I think that's part of the structure of the film. Brian did go into a black hole of sorts in the late 60s, early 70s, and I play him sort of at the peak of his creativity and then sort of going towards that hole, and John plays him sort of coming out of that hole, and he is slightly different. So I think it worked. You know, it was a leap of faith in everybody to trust that, hey, you know, as long as we go after our respective Brians, it'll work out. So it was a leap, but I do think it worked.
It's not many stories can cut together the. I mean, you're wading into the Godfather 2 waters with that stuff. You know, you guys. It's hard to do the parallel thing, but I think it's a beautiful movie. Oh, cool. Absolutely. And I mean, I really do. I mean, you mentioned how Beach Boys songs, it's like different iterations. There's like the poppy, fun, mainstream stuff that catch on as a kid, and then you really grow to respect that, you know, the art of it as you get older and you study it more. I've noticed the same thing sort of with the movies you pick too. I mean, Scorsese said it was the eternal battle between artistic expression and commercial imperative, but between A Little Miss Sunshine that'll make someone laugh, and then you're off with Pete D. Anderson doing some crazy stuff for that. So, you know, how do you keep selecting those roles?
You know, one, just trying to be myself as best as I can, and knowing, you know, a character when I read it, that I have something to offer it, or it has something to offer me, because not every job does, frankly.
Right.
And, you know, so I think just trying to be me, and then some of it is it choosing me. You know, if I had complete control over everything, you know, it's that there's so many factors that go into it. But I feel very, very lucky. You know, I've really gotten to work with some beautiful people, and you know, getting to play Brian Wilson, man. You know, I feel lucky. So. Yeah.
Do you mind if we end with a little rapid fire? I'll throw out a role and you tell me one word, just the process of acting or working with that director.
Boy.
Yeah?
Okay.
So, Little Miss Sunshine.
I think learning, you know, being the young man in a van full of some beautiful actors. You know, I just was thinking about, boy, how am I going to pull this off, and just trying to learn.
Yeah. There Will Be Blood.
Fire. The fever dream making that movie. Yeah. Desert, Sweat. Daniel, Paul, just two of the best, ballsiest, you know, people you could work with, and just you gotta throw yourself in and go for it.
Yeah. Prisoners.
Oh, fear. That was scary. No, honestly, yeah, that was, you know, to be reading, to be in bed and reading about trauma, or riding the subway and thinking about, you know, it's just not what you want to daydream about. So that one was particularly scary.
12 Years a Slave.
It's tough. That's one of those funny things as a person where you go, well, you know, I'm certainly not this character in the world, but I'm contributing to a story that is hopefully, you know, has a place in the world. So you sort of do your part to be a part of something, which is a funny compromise, you know, almost.
Yeah. And lastly, Love and Mercy.
Joy. Yeah. I just the music. You know, I couldn't love it or Brian more. And so joy and compassion. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, all of those we just named. I mean, somehow you have a knack for picking some of the best movies of this generation. So keep it up, sir.
Thanks, man.
Thanks. Nice meeting you.
Yeah. You too.
Thanks so much for joining us on Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time. I wanted to take a second to tell you about an app I really enjoy. Living in the DC area is great, and Podcast DC gathers all of the local shows that I like all in one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast DC is the new local app with hundreds of DC area podcasts to choose from. I can earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts I love instantly. Available in the App Store or in Google Play, listen local with Podcast DC.